Hi guys, welcome to another video on May in Bloom. I'm May, as you already know if you've already been here a few times. And for those of you who are new, I'm passionate about holistic decolonial living from a luminous perspective. Those are the themes I explore in my art, whether it's on my eco print shop or the things I talk about here. These are also things I hold space for and explore with clients during my holistic decolonial sessions. But all of that you can always check out in my description box. Today's subject, I feel, is one that I really think can help us reevaluate how we see so many things about the things that pulled us when we were younger. I was having a session with a client. We were talking about dreams and the creation of dreams, and I was sharing that I had realized recently that, hey, everything I wanted or desired to do as a child, I've done or am doing. There was no hidden passion or hobby or that I can say that I've neglected, or I no longer finding time or space to pursue. And this got me thinking about like what that has meant for me, but also in the sense of how it's not so common that people feel like that or can say that they have pursued their childhood dreams and desires, but also even more important that people value the pursuit of those things. It almost always feels like it's something for a few, something that you get to do if you are lucky enough, and only if it either becomes something that you're extremely really good at, or even something that you can monetize, something that gives you status, something that's valued from an external point. I remember clearly stating when I was 17, because we were having that moment of where you're starting to think about your future career and what have you, and I remember thinking that for me, actually, I would just like to be paid to be myself. And I was like, I wonder how that would work. But that sentence, like there are a few sentences that come in my mind throughout my life that I know, like, okay, this is going to be a shifting sentence. Even at that point, if it doesn't have the weight, but it changes the way I see something completely, because I'm like, I'd like to be paid just to be myself. And what that actually meant, not knowing it back when I was 17, of course, has been that doing the stuff that come naturally to me, doing the stuff that I thrive while doing stuff that actually gives me energy while I'm doing them, doing things that make me forget about time and space and things you would do if you were allowed to just be. And I thought about that especially in the context of being an African woman who lives in the diaspora, but the stories of lineage we all come from, and the privilege in being in a generation where I can actually even say that hey, I have given a go at all the things that pulled at me when I was a little child. 2 decades later, I can say that I get paid to do the things I love and things that are natural to me without really knowing how or making a clear plan of it. I just followed one step at a time, like one desire at a time, and I also took a lot of like not good paths, but I think that's also part, no, I don't think, I know that's also part of the journey, because those paths or those detours actually help me understand, not that, definitely not that, more of this, less of that. When I was younger, the thing that I remember being able to lose track of time in was I loved to draw a lot. When I got into drawing and watercolors and I could do that for hours. It was the only thing I would do that would make me forget even to eat, and I'm a Taurus. I love to eat, and that's a big thing for me. I don't know what it could be for you, but for me, like, it made me forget it's 12 o'clock, I should probably go have a snack or have my lunch, like a little, as a young being and child. I just draw, and my mom would have to be like, okay, now you need to put your stuff away because it's time for you to do something else, or it's time for us to eat or prepare something or clean or whatever duties. Whenever I got a chance to do that, without knowing it, I know now that was my state of flow. The other thing I really loved when I was younger was I loved writing, and I loved storytelling. I loved communication. I loved words. I love creating worlds or decoding worlds or putting things into perspective just in the way that you use words. So just exploring ideas and letting them become as you write. It was a way to explore my own thoughts. I journaled a lot, so it was a way to explore what was happening in my mind, or to engage with my imagination, basically. And these are just some of the things that I really love doing from a young age, like drawing, creating, being curious about ideas and what made things work. And even with people, like from a young age in my family, I was the person who was like, but why do we do that? But why do we not do that? Or I wasn't afraid to seek ways that could help me understand the world better, even if it meant crossing some of the lines that maybe you weren't supposed to cross as a young African child. But I was really sincerely curious, and I think maybe that's also an important word, that in the sense of like sincerity is also encoded behind our own intrinsic desires, right? There is a sincerity in what you want, what you desire, what you dream for yourself. You can feel like when they're sincerely from yourself, from your core, and not things you've inherited or been told to do or expected to do. There's a different kind of pull and attraction when you have those things, like when you love, like for example, loving art, loving communication, loving ideas, and wanting to engage with them and put them around, wanting to deconstruct things that seem fixed, and who gets to say what is fixed. Well, and then I see myself years later, and I do so many of those things now naturally in the work I do and in the things I enjoy doing, whether even just as hobbies or things that relax me or things I can feel fed by, things I do that spring from my own inner sincerity. They're things that don't just take time to do, but actually give me a fulfilled feeling of the time spent. It made me wonder, where do those things come from? Like, where do these desires come from, where you want to play ball, or there are certain kinds of art forms that attract you? I want to play music. For my partner, it's music. Like for her, that has been something that has always pulled her, exploring of sound. And my sister's also in that way, like from a young age, like she was really attracted to music and sound. I think about that, and I think about my other sister, my late sister, and she was naturally like somebody who loved like community and nurturing and building bonds. And naturally, as a young kid, like we all had these elements growing up in the same house that spoke of a signature that was beyond our environment, I would say. It's a long time since I'm engaged with this quote, but he talks about how children don't come from you, they come through you. And this idea is very interesting because in a lot of Western understanding of what a being is, what a human is, there is this belief that a person is born like almost like a blank slate, pure. And I love that word pure because again, it gives us ideas around religiosities and the Abrahamic faiths, but also patriarchal values, in the sense that something comes as a blank slate for you to draw onto, for you to infuse your ideas. Child is just something, a vessel that then you get to guide, or like they can be anything left and right. They can do, Whereas if we explore other ways of seeing life and other ways of exploring what we are and what we live amongst, you could almost argue that a being is born as a unique signature of themselves. Right? When you're created in your mom's belly, the mixture of your dad and your mom, like there is enough in such a small thing to then start expressing itself, right? And then we can decide like whether you're just a biological clump of being, or we can explore if the vessel, the physical vessel, is there directed and formed by the spirit, the soul that inhabits it, which has its own unique perspective, its own unique pool, its own unique talents and visions, but it's a complete soul expressing itself through this vessel and having a life dedicated or directed by this complete soul. And so the things you are pulled to, the things you are drawn to, they are true of your truest nature. It's not, oh, it would be nice if you drew, right? Or if it would be nice if you played the instrument, or it would be nice if you engage more in community building or exploring or any of the other million things that draw us, building stuff. Some people just like to build stuff. But rather, in order for you to fulfill your soul's desires and full completion, you following these sincere desires within you that have been with you sincerely since you were young, is what is going to give you the fullest experience of your being, the fullest experience of life, as your existence as you. And by default then, by neglecting these things, you do not become a fully developed you, right? And that comes about because in the world we live in, and like I said, I like to see things from a decolonial perspective, the world we live in makes us believe that these things are very frivolous. They're not really that important. Okay, you wanted to draw, but now you're grown, da da da. And also, let's be realistic. You need to feed people. You need to pay your mortgages or whatever you have. And these desires are kind of like just things in the background, nice to have. So, and if you're going to actually invest any time in them, they have to be something that gives you either social status, especially in the digital age. Or the way that people are also very tired of the current model of making a living, then maybe feeling like I need to pressure myself to make my writing the way I sustain myself, or make the drawing or the sport I love. So then there's this feeling of like the thing that was supposed to be almost as guides and compasses that was trying to lead you towards how you build the skills that you uniquely need to live your fullest life, like sincerely, not out of monetization or like capitalistic values or social status or what is expected, but just almost like how when a child is young, they are encouraged to engage in creative play. In fact, a child that is able to be allowed to engage in creative play develops a higher sense of self. They have more confidence. They become better at problem solving. They build better relationships. It increases their emotional intelligence. There's so many benefits to allowing your child to actually engage in creative play. But the interesting thing is, like, when does that phase end? Because we live in a world that kind of really devalues creativity while also very exploitative of creativity, because without it, everything we do wouldn't matter. Like, even if we all were very rich, but you couldn't see any art, you couldn't listen to any music, you couldn't engage with any plays or movies or even like community discussions. If you couldn't engage with things that we have labeled as frivolous and unimportant, and things that we are quick to defund in systems and countries whenever we feel like it's time to just be serious and productive, which are very masculine focused ideas and ideals that separate us from what we all need, regardless of sex, to be full human beings. We are by nature creative beings. We live in a universe and in a world that teaches us that this is actually quite natural. You don't live in a world that has one productive and efficient flower. It has millions of varieties of flowers in different colors. And I always thought about that, and I was like, that's so interesting. And for me, it's another proof of that our natural way of existing is based in abundance, in there is more than enough space, there's more enough everything. There is so much more space for you to not only live and enjoy life, but to be in awe of life. That's why there's not one single plant or one single fruit or the one that maybe would have the most efficient nutrition and the efficient. Whenever I see science fiction, I see like the future of very Western patriarchal ideas of like, oh, we're so efficient, people don't even need to eat anymore, they have a pill, because they imagine like that's the goal of life, being efficient, being productive. It doesn't matter if there is soul or spirit, or it nurtures you, or it helps you feel like you're living a fulfilled life. It only matters like result oriented, numbers oriented, all of these ideals that really don't care about the human spirit, the human soul, the human true development that doesn't just end after childhood. We believed after childhood that you are done developing. Like, even when we think about the brain fully forming at 25, as some science say, as science tells us, we imagine that that's a sign, like on a biological way, which in the Eurocentric worldview, that's the only thing that matters, what can be measured or what can be seen. So we think your brain is fully developed, you are now a full adult, right? If we explore what you are and what you came here as, beyond just biological coding that you inherited from your mother and father, and not only that, but also what you're going to be influenced by, whether it's nurture or whether it's nature, and what you're going to become based on the access of information, education, privilege, right? There's something beyond that, something that overrides all of that, which is your soul, which is the same essence, I truly believe, that creates also the world that we live in. The intelligence behind everything that exists, all that has ever been and always ever will be. Whether you put that into a god, or you put that into the universe, or what we cannot deny, that there is intelligence. That's why I always think it's very interesting when people say like, no, there's nothing. This is just a beautifully well coordinated symbiotic mistake that just randomly happened, you know? And even in that regard, I could even argue that beyond the mistake that happened, that is our planet and us, you could then say the mistake lives in a bigger cosmos that has divine laws, that even a mistake is divinely designed, right? We could argue that, but like that's not the point of this discussion at all. What I wanted to say is your development goes beyond your childhood years, and it goes beyond your young adult years. It's supposed to continue throughout life. You are evolving as a being, as you. And when we experience stagnation and depression and despair, usually it's because we are no longer connected to what is needed for us to feel like we are growing, learning, exploring, creating. You will talk to people and they'll say like, I'm not creative at all, because there's such a limited understanding of what it means to be creative. Problem solving is a form of creativity. Being able to put words in a certain way that helps people understand things, maybe even complex things in simpler terms. Being able to move emotions around, energy around, cooking, like moving your body, or even like imagination. Right? Just sitting there and being able to imagine, I wonder what would happen if this was looking like that, or this was added to that, or this evolved into this. This is all creativity. You creating, you going from A to B, and you engaging with life that changes things, where you are alchemizing with life. You are co-creating with life. Even like when we think about things like primal things as making love, right? Like, or even creating a child, like all of those things are creative energy. You are by nature a creator. Even the way you arrange your day, right? And maybe you're like, okay, you might be like, no, that's organization. No, it's also creativity, because you're able to create order out of chaos or out of the unknown, right? You are creating something. Creating is not just painting and, I don't know, dancing and putting on plays and what have you. It's a way of being. And it's a way of being that we naturally are connected to when we're young. But then we have decided in the world that is dominated, in the worldview that is dominated, that at some point this should stop, or it should only carry on if it can sustain us financially, right? Or we can continue doing it as a hobby if there is time for it. We don't value it to the regard that actually this is quite essential. Kind of like how now we are learning, oh, mental health, you know, like there's all this stuff we always thought we were supposed to do, but mental health is a real thing and it can really impact you. And what I hate about the development of the understanding of what a human is and what a human needs, because we're still growing in that to thrive, not just survive. What I dislike about it is how often we're like, we need to care about mental health because it's good for the economy. We need to invest in mental health because it helps people be more productive and it will help businesses thrive. It shows in such a brutal way what our main focus is in so many things, that if it does not feed the bottom line, we should not care about it. What I'm suggesting, what I've been practicing in my life, is actually to have it the other way around. To know that, yeah, and as scary as that sounds, but like I've done so many scary things at this point, I feel like fuck it. But in the most grounded way ever. I'm not somebody who's going to just throw myself off the deep end, but I'm willing to let go of things even though I'm like, oh my God, what the fuck, what now? If I know I can fully sense and I have fully understood to the best of my abilities that this does not feed you at all. This does not make sense anymore. And this is not even something that is sustainable. Like, thankfully, because I grew up, my soul being naturally very curious, I've always wanted to understand, as I said earlier, but why? Why do we do that like that? Why is that a fact? Why is that? So something I came here with has also helped me liberate me more and more, because I'm able then to be like, okay, according to my very sometimes even neurotic obsession about understanding something, this does not make any sense. This is not viable. This is not sustainable. This is not holistic. This is based on structures of oppression and hierarchies and scarcities and fear, and this is not the things I want to base my life on. So the jury is out that until further notice, this no longer applies. And to my best ability, I'm going to try to find something that makes more sense, right? So in that regard, we have been programmed naturally, especially if you also grew up in the West, The money comes before everything. Being able to sustain yourself financially comes before everything, right? And people will even be okay with you being miserable, unfulfilled, as long as you're making good money and you can defend, like, okay, yeah, maybe I'm not really that happy or mentally stable, but look at my big house, my money, and that. And what I also want to argue, like, I think before I would describe myself as maybe left-leaning, but the truth is I'm just about sovereignty. I'm just about letting people live and live dignified lives, which everybody is entitled to. But what my leaning would have thought when I was growing up was that money, especially also coming from a religious background, that money is evil, right? So I also think like that's an extreme. Money is a tool, useful, not vital, not even a necessity. That's why, like, when people say I need a job, I always like to correct them in my sessions. No, you need a livelihood. There's a difference. But you thinking about it like that actually changes everything. The last 2 years for me on the road traveling in, this is where I'm also filming today, in our caravan, a project that had been a dream for a while. But the last few years doing that and seeing life from a different perspective, engaging in different ways of existing, whether it was through volunteering, exchange, or even like simpler way of living, so you could actually just make money the way you prefer to make it. But the main experience, I would say, has been like the putting on the head the values I was supposed to have growing up. And to be fair, like, from my experiences, like with my education, I have a bachelor's in sustainable business and design. That's where I first learned about, like, okay, people, planet, and profit, and in that order, basically, right? And this is still something new that we're trying to incorporate, but truly, it's very hard for most people to imagine that profit shouldn't be before everything, because that's what we've been brainwashed and programmed constantly to think and value. So it's huge work to actually say, wait a minute, when I put money before everything else, I think that money is more vital to my life experience, to my thrival, fulfillment, than all the other things. Like money before my health, money before my family, money before my joy, my safety, my anything, right? And then I was like, okay, in this new dynamic that I want to exist in this decolonial womanist perspective, where I don't want to be controlled by money, and I still want to have a life based on thriving, and I still want to have a life where I have my needs met in the best way I can. I live in good spaces, and I can still dream about like the vision I have for the next step of my life, which is going to require a lot of funding. I'm not against money, but for me, what's more important is, how do I make a living? How do I engage with money? How do I engage in my life where money is almost like a byproduct of what sincerely fulfills and benefits me as a spirit, as a being? And the interesting thing in that is it has invited so much unlearning. And I think I can make an entire video on that, like just the unlearning of poverty, and which is so well linked to the overvalue of money as the only form of abundance. I made like a carousel on this on my Instagram about like how to decolonize ideas of abundance, because this has been something I've discovered during these 2 years of traveling and exploring different ways of living, which was a very important dream and desire pulling me, that has taught me the next things I need for the next stage of my being. It's not just an adventure and then I go back to being, because everything changes you, impacts you. But I've been learning to redefine the ideas of abundance and thriving and well-being. And I have been able to see how the things I was attracted to as a child were not just things I could do to pass time or to be like, oh, I'm having a creative moment, but they were intrinsically also building the kind of person I needed to be to live my most fulfilled life, my most confident life, my most empowered life, and sovereign life. And I never saw it like that because we're not taught to value it like that, right? Whereas if we take the framework that we learn about children engaging in creative play, and the studies, of course, are not evolving, there's an interest in having a more decolonized approach to childhood development, which could challenge the idea that the human being is born as an empty vessel, but rather that no, the human being is born complete in spirit, like the essence of the human being, which means, again, allowing sovereignty, because it will mean that we are all complete, not people needing to be completed by life, right? We're here actually to add to life, right? Kind of like when you think about the seed already has everything it's supposed to do to become what it's supposed to become. And it's there to add to life, right? But it's in harmonious co-creation and coexistence with life. It's not an empty vessel like a glass that you put water in. That's why when we think about death, which is the other video I made about how decolonizing death has made me feel much braver, is recognizing what is left when you die. And for me, my conclusion after living religion and the years of exploration in spirituality, is that like the soul never dies, the soul goes on, is and will always be. So when you live your life as now, you are a signature soul having a unique experience as yourself. But this is not touchable, this is not corruptible, this is not something that can be taken away from you. Even the ideas that we have like souls can be sold. It's a form of consent, of feeling like you can sell your soul, which by itself you're selling the consent of believing that your soul is sold. I don't believe that you can actually sell your soul because it does not work in that framework. But you can actually say, I value maybe like the typical ideas we have around that, like I value becoming successful in this field so much, or I don't know what people sell their souls for beyond that, like that I will sell my soul. But it's you then giving that power away. Do you understand? Like and then saying like, I'm going to now source my power out there while believing now I'm without soul, but I believe that because I did something so big to sell it, I can now be very successful. But it's you're consenting to both realities and both stories that need you to believe they're realities for them to have an impact, right? It's not that you actually sold your soul. A lot of life is literally like that. Like it's a play of stories that we get to engage with, whether from a place of I believe that, and that if I give power to that, that's reality. That's why colonization and the enforcement of religion and worldviews on people was so important, because like I always say, if you get everybody to give energy to the same ideas, to the same stories, to the same hierarchies of power, you get them to enforce the energy and the reality around this, whereas we are all creative beings able to create realities that make sense to us and benefit us. But if somebody has stolen your ability to do that, or has tricked you in thinking that they have the authority on what is reality, what makes sense, what is progress, what is development, what is success, and you play along, not knowing you're playing along because you're like, I'm not playing along, I have no other choice. You even saying that is you consenting, like, I have no other choice. I have decided with all the power that I'm born with, that I do have, to believe that I have no other choice than this. Because in even the smallest ways, like I always think about Nelson Mandela and how he said that even though he was in prison, he was free. And I think like that's a very spiritual way to see yourself or your existence, that nothing can cage a spirit. You cannot destroy a spirit. You can redirect it. You can impose things that make it less connected to its power and authority and sovereignty. But you can't cage it in, and you can't suppress it forever. Even when beyond death, I believe we return to our realization of who we are. If you are in a space where you're feeling stagnant, if you're feeling aimless or without an idea of where you are supposed to be headed in life, sometimes it's not so much about what is out there, but what is in here, what you have lost connection to, or how your values and prioritizations have been skewed by society, by demands, obligations, culture, traditions, religions. As we said with the selling of the soul, to outsource the direction of your being and your soul, to outsource the direction of your existence, and to outsource the values that you should have, instead of actually understanding that everything I'm seeking is constantly here. I was born with it. I'm a full seed, complete. And as we always say, if a seed is not blooming in one area, we put it in a different area. We don't say there's something wrong with the seed, because the seed, given the right environment, it can fulfill its truest self and bloom. And I feel like that's also who we are. The environments we're in, it can be very depressive and very disempowering and very sabotaging in the sense of who we are in our truest nature. And I also believe that actually by encouraging more people to engage with their creative self and to know, even if you're just doing the same things, but to appreciate the creativity behind it. Even how you organize your house, is creative play. And to infuse that desire of, I'm constantly creating. What you create for your life, the dreams you have, the way that you imagine your place in the world, you're creating an identity, you're creating a personality, you're creating values, but to engage more and more with the creative intention behind the many things that you do naturally or even take for granted, as having opportunity to approach them from a creative perspective. When we interact more with this, these are the things that bring us presence, that bring us ease, that bring us belonging, and belonging beyond belonging externally, but belonging to ourselves, connected to ourselves, in tune with ourselves here and on a higher level, your higher self, where then you are able to be more aligned with what will truly fulfill you, what will truly lead you to a space where you love your life, you love who you are, you feel confident in who you are, your ideas, your ways of existing in the world, the things that you value, things that you want to create, or the things you want to add to the world. That sense of confidence and grounding and assurance can only come from you going more within, and within from a place of understanding, who am I? Like, what is my true essence? And even learning to love yourself from engaging with those things, like whether it's drawing or writing or journaling, playing music. When we see from our own indigenous upbringing, many of us can see that creativity was just the way that people lived. Before colonization came and told people that, hey, y'all are just going around making festivals and blah, blah, blah. I always say that, but it's a simplification. It's not like the only thing we were doing. We're also doing a lot of other things, some of them not so good. But we were busy making things, festivals, like dances, plays, we were engaged. And I feel like this is also gives clarity on why when the Eurocentric worldview or the Eurocentric mind engaged with a lot of indigenous culture, they saw them almost as naive, as childlike, easier to manipulate. And they were easier to manipulate because they could not fathom, for many of them, the kind of like depravity that comes from children grown in an environment where they only need to survive. That's my compassionate side finally coming out for my colonizers. But that's also a form of self-empowerment, realizing that, hey, these people did all this shitty stuff because they were feeling really shitty. Because guess what? You don't go around conquering and destroying people and their worldview because you feel great and grounded and amazing by yourself. People who are at peace with themselves tend to want to be at peace with other people. So recognizing that from a place of like, these were beings that were oppressing each other, depriving each other of connection, depriving each other of joy, and so they could not do anything but spread that around the world when we talk from a colonization perspective. But then relating more and seeing what our ancestors were doing was not just passing time, it was actually a way to develop a being, engaging in dance, engaging in music and storytelling and creativity. People were out there just making vases, and I really would encourage a lot of people to engage more with indigenous art forms, and to see the beauty, the detail, the dedication. There's so many beautiful things, and indigenous is like everybody, every race, everybody has that. What people were able to do when they were not just here trying to survive and make money, or distracted by the internet and social media 24/7. We would be amazed at who we could become, especially now where we are with our understanding of ourselves, of the environments we live in, understanding of the world we live in, understanding what is a human being, what does it mean to be a human being, and engaging more with what does the human being need to become fully evolved, not as an endpoint that ends at 7 because that's what you need the most before, like those are like the hypnosis age, and then beyond that it's literally you then just playing out what you've had in this first 7 years for most people, unless you do a lot of work to unlearn that, or thinking it from a biological sense, scientific phase, that okay, your brain now is fully formed and developed, so now you're officially an adult. But seeing it as a spirit that is here to constantly become, constantly evolve, constantly create. It's again that Eurocentric worldview, like there is an ending and a beginning, but it's continuous at the same time. You are constantly just on bigger scales, and as you learn, like anybody who loves anime or stories of of superheroes who have talents or who have abilities, but then they need to hone those abilities. We are all like that in our own way. We all have our own superpowers. We have our own callings, our own unique way of putting things together, because every being is so unique and different. And engaging in that with the things that feel true to us, that call us, help us to become our own superheroes. Like, I don't know how to better say that than you get to develop on a space that is really internally sprung first. Whereas I feel like what happens in our current existence, that is cut off, and then you're like, now only things that should pull you are what your culture tells you, what society tells you, how you look externally, not actually what is true to you internally, right? And this creates really unhappy, unstable, and ungrounded, unconfident beings who don't know who they are, who don't know what brings them joy, who feel like joy is a privilege, an extra, but not something you're supposed to pursue or supposed to want or supposed to be deserving of as an everyday experience, right? No, like, no, that would be silly. And I'm not saying joy and you greening all the way, but a sense of pure fulfillment and engagement and curiosity around life, right? And I think like that's our truest way of existing. Like I said, like this is still a space I'm exploring, but I really feel like when I see my own life and the things I've healed, the things I've been able to grow, the person I've become, which is the most important thing, obviously, and I see how creativity has been such a huge part of that, and allowing and demanding and reorganizing my life in a way that actually prioritized that without even knowing that that's what I was doing clearly, but just I want to do more of that. I feel good when I do more of that, and learning to trust ourselves. When you're disconnected from that, you automatically, where did that come out? Automatically learn to source your being, your confidence, your belonging, your power externally. And that is very valuable to a world that wants to subjugate people, but not very valuable to us that want to be sovereign beings and reconnect to our truest power. And I hope that the people who watch me are interested in that. Otherwise, what are you doing here? You know, I know I'm cute, but I'm not that cute. I wanted to share that with you, and I hope it inspires you, especially now like we're in the cozy cold weather. Like usually that's when people feel like there's maybe more time to do indoor stuff and be creative in the stereotypical way. But my idea is just for you to engage with the desired and the things that you truly were drawn to as a child, when you were less corrupted, yet less filled up with other people's ideas and other people's traditions and doctrine and even trauma. Like before that, you came here as a pure knowing, and in your childish self, you were expressing that. If you can connect more and more to those things, you will connect more and more to your truer self, which in turn will give you more confidence in who you are and your way of existing in the world, and in the way of taking up space in the way that, damn it, I'm here, you know, and I want to fully be here, and I want to be fully engaged existing here, and I have every right to enjoy my life here. I have every right to be here and create my own path, not just follow one, and to trust my own intuition as a guide, as a good enough guide, right? Just leading me one step at a time, one sincere desire at a time. I really hope that's really helpful to some of you, or even like giving you a new perspective in this soul talk. But for me, it's been, I've had so many epiphanies in the last 2 years. Like this dream of slow traveling in our caravan has given me so much, and I'm happy that now we're in a settled phase, because now I can actually like share those things and create from those spaces and become from those spaces. But I think if you've followed me a while and you've seen my videos, because I've been here for a long time, you will already see like how that is showing up in me, like how I've changed and how I've grown. And I think it's thanks to those things, to following your intuition, following your truth, trusting your path, trusting your pace. When you go back to yourself and you trust yourself, and it's another form of revolution, sovereignty and kindness to the world, that there is more and more people who are allowing themselves, valuing themselves and loving themselves enough to be and be led inwardly and tuned inwardly, and to live more sincere lives, which I know when we do that, we're going to become more sincere people who create a more sincere world, right? Anyway, thank you so much for spending this time with me. I hope it's of benefit as always. And I'll see you in my next video. Bye, guys.
Took my